Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to
This is Nos Odietis.
This episode of Nos Odietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Odietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes regaled through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicola leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is going to
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
That Porter says cheated.
You want to win? This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
But welcome to a live episode of Nos Odietis, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. We're recording on February 20th, 2024 from Project 9 Brewery in the Maple Leaf neighborhood of Seattle. I am your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our engineer, Lickett. And later in the show, for those that weren't here, I guess I'm blowing it, is Wade Weber, the Sounders Director of Development. But thank you so much for coming out here. We're raising some money for the BF Day Elementary 5th grade science trip. So I appreciate everyone helping out with that. And I should say we had a trivia game earlier in the day that I want to give a shout out to. I got to find the winning, what were they? The Orcas. And the Angry Orcas won the trivia game, so congratulations to them. But yeah, we're doing a little talking about we'll do a little kind of recap of preseason, look a little bit ahead to the LAFC game on Saturday. And anyway, Aaron, thanks for joining. Thanks for being here and everything. This is should be an interesting one. So the Sounders played like 500 minutes of preseason this year. Did you have any big takeaways? Do you feel like you learned anything?
No. That's preseason, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever learned anything from preseason. That usually becomes apparent in hindsight.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd get ahead of it this year and just...
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I will say, one of the things I looked up for an article that I wrote earlier today was... I had this vague recollection of the Sounders having some bad preseasons and then going on to having good seasons. Turns out in 2017, they went winless in preseason. In 2019, they went winless in preseason. In 2022, they went winless in preseason. In those 3 seasons, they went to MLS Cup, they won MLS Cup, and then they won CONCACAF Champions League. So I don't know that there is a whole lot to take away. And the Sounders did not, I should say, they didn't go winless this preseason, but they didn't necessarily look great. I want to say they outscored their opponents like 9-8, something like that. But was a little bit more concerning, if you are inclined to be concerned of preseason results, was their starters went scoreless in their last 2 games. So over 180 minutes, the starters didn't score. I don't know. Does that raise any alarm bells at all for you?
No, not really. I'm just going to keep saying no
fair
to
enough,
every
fair
question. No, I mean, it's... I thought everyone looked pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm still skeptical of Raul until I see consistency, but I think that we saw last year down the stretch, he doesn't have to be the old Raul for the Sounders to be dangerous. So I'm just, we'll see. I'm not too worried.
I mean, I think the thing with Raul to me is that even if he has lost a step, even if he is not quite the player that he was, he's going to score if he's healthy.
Yeah.
The question is, can he stay healthy? And on a similar note, you have Jordan Morris, who is likely going to be the starter until something goes wrong, presumably. And I know there's a lot of people that are worried a little bit about his performance last year, but if you just look at the numbers, he was a top 10 forward by virtually any objective metric, and that's like goals per 90. That's goals as his XG per 90. He actually scored more goals than he had XG, which is theoretically a sign that he was actually good at finishing. Although what stands out in our minds is, of course, the last game he had against LAFC, where he doesn't finish a very clear opportunity. And then this preseason, he had probably 5 one-on-one chances, didn't finish any of them. But then I go out to training and he's finishing everything, and I wonder, is this in his head that is he more thinking about how he's not finishing in preseason games, or is he not that he is finishing in games? And frankly, does any of it matter?
I don't really think it does. I know that the rebuttal to his numbers last season is, but a lot of that was front loaded, or he's so streaky.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of strikers outside of the very, 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 very top level of strikers in any league. And so I don't think it's a huge concern. If anything, like getting it out of his system in preseason is a positive, right? So, I think Jordan is the player he is at this point, and that's a very good MLS player. That's, he's been a very consistent, I think he said top 10 forward by pretty much every metric. We've been pretty spoiled where that seems like a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that's fair. But if their defense continues to be the way that it was last year, which was, I'll remind everyone, they had they allowed the fewest goals in the league last year. They allowed the fewest XG in the league last year. They are actually bolstered their defense in the offseason. They picked up Nathan, who his last healthy season, he was one of the best center backs in the league. They picked up John Bell, who is probably not a starter, but is a decent backup as those things go. They didn't really lose any of their important players from their defense. They don't need to be a top 10 scoring team to be a very competitive team.
No, definitely not. And they don't have to repeat the level of defensive performance last year that they had to be a competitive team either, which is good because they're probably not going to.
I mean, that could be, that said, their defense has looked, for the most part, pretty good. They had the one game against Odense BK that was not so good, where they gave up, I guess, 5 goals in 2 games against them. But against the other 3 opponents, the defense looked pretty good, almost across the board. So I would say there's reason to think that their defense will be at least close to as good as they were last year.
Yeah, I think so. Even if they don't put up the same numbers, I think it's the best defense in the league.
Were you generally, we haven't talked a lot during the offseason. Were you generally satisfied with the moves that they made this offseason, which were, they signed Pedro de la Vega, they signed Danny Musovski, they brought Braudilio Rodriguez up from the Defiance, and then they signed Nathan and John Bell.
Yeah, I think so. I think that every real big hole on the roster has been plugged. I would always like to see them do more. I think everyone would, but that's not always feasible with the salary cap being what it is. Want to leave flexibility. I don't know how much more you can really ask for given where the roster was.
Were you at all surprised to see, like, a lot of the preseason predictions are now coming out. MLS Soccer does the list that coaches love to make a big stink out of, but the Sounders were first on, I think, 12 of 17 ballots in the West, and then they were no lower than third on anyone's ballot. Does that feel right to you? Does that make you nervous that there's almost too much belief in them from national pundits?
Both, I think. It does feel right. I think this is also a team that, if a lot of things go wrong, could end up being pretty bad. And that's true of every team, right?
Sure.
But with a roster that is maybe not as young as you would like in a lot of key areas, thin in a few key areas, the wheels could come off, right? But I feel pretty good about this team. I don't know that I'd pick them to finish first in the West, but they'd certainly be near the top.
So it's maybe a little doom and gloom to look at it this way, but if there's one player they can't afford to lose, who do you think that player is?
Probably Joao Paulo.
Yeah. That's probably who I would. I mean, even though Christian Roldan was the player they lost last year, and that was very visible, I tend to agree with you that Joao Paulo feels like the hardest to replace player on the roster.
It's almost always a midfielder. It's one of those two. Yeah.
And is there, I guess, do you have any more faith in their ability to overcome a potential João Paulo? Like, I bring it up because João Paulo hasn't been training so far this week. I would say there's at least a decent chance he doesn't start on Saturday. Do you have any more faith that either Danny Leyva, Obed Vargas, Josh Atencio, that group can sort of combine to overcome his departure? Or his missing?
Definitely a lot more than I would have had at this time last year. I mean, there's a drop off, right? But I don't think it's, especially for a game too, not as crippling as maybe as it would be otherwise. But I definitely have concerns. I mean, I think you lose any of the top 3 players on this team, and it's a pretty big downgrade unless somebody below them takes a big step forward.
So I will say, on the other player that we were talking about, Christian Roldan, the thing that gives me the most hope that they could afford to lose him is Pedro de la Vega, who I have only seen play in very limited time when, this last weekend when he suited up for the Sounders. What's been your impression of de la Vega? Both, I don't know if you probably didn't see that game much, but in terms of the highlights and in terms of what you've seen of him.
I think he's a hugely exciting player that everybody should be patient with. It's always a tough adjustment, especially for a younger player. And I would hate to see people kind of losing their mind about him if he doesn't hit the ground running, but I'm super excited about him. This is what people have been asking for, with bringing in younger players instead of players in the prime, which has sort of been what the Sounders have done in the past. And that might mean some growing pains, but I think it's ultimately going to end up being worth it.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I've seen in the 35 or so minutes that he played against Sacramento, I thought he looked about as good as we could have hoped. He is a very dribbly player. He is not afraid of, coaches have said every time he touches the ball, he's looking at goal. He's looking to go towards goal. I would say, at least in the limited time that we saw him, that was the case. When I've seen him out at training, that's very much the case. He looks to be, in some ways, almost on a different level in training, especially in small-sided games. He's got a lot of control. He's very aggressive. And he also does it with his big smile, and everyone seems to gravitate towards him. He is. I think he's going to be a really fun player, and I can see why the Sounders were so sort of like zeroed in on signing.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the initial impressions, which are very minimal at this point, obviously they haven't played a game, have been nothing but positive. He seems happy to be here. He doesn't seem like, players are pretty good at the PR element of things, but he certainly has not given an impression of someone who thinks he's too good for the league, who sees this as like a short-term transitional thing, which is really all you can ask for.
Yeah, I'll just bring it up as a point of contrast. Today, Evander, who is the big designated player that Portland broke all these transfer records for to sign last year, today he was in some like official availability, and he said, I kind of wish I had signed with Fluminense last year.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know if that's really what you want your $10 million DP saying a few days before the season starts.
Yeah, it's not ideal, no.
And so one of the things I recently read about De La Vega is that, so he played for Lanús, which is a well-known but relatively smaller club in Argentina. And they're sort of known for developing players, and they have like a school, like an on-site school. It's part of what they do. And his dad apparently felt so strongly about making sure he got an education that he didn't let him go to school there, and he made him go to like the local public school, which I thought was just kind of a neat thing that you don't hear a lot. You don't hear those types of stories a lot coming out of Argentina, especially for, at the time, he was a player that Man City was, looking at, that Real Madrid was looking at, that supposedly had like a $12 million price tag on him. And his dad's like, no, I want you going to the local public high school.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then in that same story, there was a bit about, and I don't know, they didn't go into depth on this, but I thought it was an interesting thing that I guess he has older sisters, and they have instilled certain progressive views in him as a result, which I thought was another thing that was just kind of like, oh, that's a nice thing to hear about.
It is, yeah, especially, well, never mind, I won't.
But no, I think people are really going to like him. And of course, if you've seen this guy, his hair is absolutely glorious. And I know it's silly to talk about his hair, but it really is. If you see, it just bounces and it has this.
It's very nice.
Flow to
it's
it.
very
It's
nice.
pretty amazing.
It's been a while since we've had hair that good on this.
No,
game.
it really has, and the Sounders were really kind of due. So all that said, Aaron, what are some of the teams in the West? You said you weren't quite sure if you would pick them to win the West. What are the teams that you are sort of like looking at as competition or you're a little bit more concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's LAFC is the obvious one. Nobody else stands out to me. There are other good teams in the West. There are teams who look good who are probably going to be terrible. There are teams who look terrible who are probably going to be okay. LAFC seems like the team that is in the conversation with the Sounders to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you there. I think it's hard to ever pick against LAFC at this point. The Galaxy have spent a lot of money in this offseason. I'm not entirely sure that it's money well spent. They don't have a great track record of that, but they do have some new talent evaluators that are presumably going to do a little bit better job of spending all that money. I don't know that they spent a lot on defense, though, and that seems to be really where they've struggled the most in recent years is just not – I mean, they give up a ton of goals.
Yeah, and I think that spending a lot of money on flashier attacking players and ignoring everything else is kind of their blueprint for the last 10 years, right? So, more of the same, but that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's pretty much that's what we have, I think.
I think so. I'm losing my voice. So
yeah. Well, again, thank you to everyone for coming out today. If you're listening to this, we have another segment coming up with Wade Weber. I'll give you a peek behind the curtain. We actually already recorded that live, so but people here know that.
Yeah. But they'll have to listen to this too, because
exactly.
They can't, yeah.
Welcome back to Nos Arietes. We are here at Project 9 Brewing, and joining me right now is the Sounders Director of Development, Wade Weber. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jeremiah. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, yeah, this is at least the third or fourth time I think that you've been on, so I appreciate you doing this all these times. And
you're welcome.
Why do you keep doing it?
I don't think we've covered the subject yet. And I'm not sure what the subject is, but it's not yet covered. So we got to keep working.
Right, exactly. One of these days we'll figure out why we have you on. But so you had a pretty seemingly a significant title change. You were the Tacoma Defiance coach the last 3 seasons. Before that, you were a Tacoma Defiance assistant, and before that, you were an academy coach. You sort of been working your way up to this. Can you explain the new job and what attracted you to it?
Yeah, I've had a few people ask me, was this, did you want to do this? As if I was shoved aside so they could bring a better person in. I've reached an age, I'm 57 now, I think. Is it that old? 7, yes, 57. And I don't want to do this for 30 more years. And I also don't think that I think I can do more than just stand on the sideline. So my interests broadened and the opportunity came. It's a new position. There used to be an academy director. And so the director of development oversees both the academy and Defiance. The idea being that I can help develop the culture that we have with Defiance kind of across both of those areas. And I maybe this isn't news to anybody, but in the beginning, there were the Sounders, right? And that's all there was. There was no academy. There was no S2 or Defiance. So they were very much in silos for a long time. And I give Schmetzer a lot of credit because he and I have a connection from years ago. His twin younger brothers, Walter and Andy Schmetzer, we're near Lake City, like the Lake City Hawks. And
Schmetzer Sport House used to be not so far from here.
It certainly did used to be not far from here. And so Walter and Andy, his twin younger brothers, are my age. And we played against each other our entire youth. Walter Schmetzer Sr. was the coach of that team, legend. And so Brian has been great about sort of trust is a funny word, but he's expressed to me that he trusts me. So if I say this guy, I'll go ahead and say it, is a tough kid, right? if I say that, he at least understands the math I'm using to come to that conclusion. So it was a good situation. I enjoyed being the Defiance coach, but talk about sameness. There is a sameness about like every -4 day, like 4 days prior to the game, the session, you're looking for this amount of high-speed running and this amount of accels, decels, and then there's the game. The game day is pretty much the same. You're just maybe waking up in a hotel rather than waking up at home. And I was looking for something more than that. I wasn't bored, because it's hard to be bored in a sport, right? It's exciting. But I just felt like, also I felt like I was clogging the artery for some really talented younger coaches. We have a assistant coach. My assistant coach was Michael Morris. He's still the assistant coach for our new coach, Hervé Diese. And I think Michael's exceptional. Someday, hopefully, we see him continue to move up the ladder. But I could have sat in that seat probably as long as I wanted, because I didn't complain much. And I understood the second team it's a hard job, because you never get to pick your team. Every week they're saying you got to play these guys, and guess what? That guy's got 45 minutes and he's got 70. So your subs are already predetermined. But I was kind of cool with that. It actually made my job easier. It's not my fault. He made me take him out. And we did have in my 3 years as head coach, I'm patting myself on the back, but we promoted 10 players to the first team in those 3 years, which 2 of them are not with the club anymore. Sam Adeniran, we traded to St. Louis. And I think there's something in the transfer that we actually get money every time he scores a goal.
Yeah,
I think so.
That's the only reason it would have made sense, right?
Oh, it's been good. And Abdoulaye Sissoko, AB Sissoko was out of contract, and he's now signed with
Memphis. I think.
Memphis, yeah, he's playing in the USL. But the other 8 are still there, and so it's a great run. Jackson Reagan, Josh Tencio. Well, Josh was prior. Obed Vargas. Those were guys that in the last couple of years have come through Defiance into the first team, and so I enjoyed that. But have I answered your question?
Yeah, I think you did.
Have I covered the subject?
Yeah, you've definitely covered that subject pretty well. You talked about how there is a real conflict sometimes between winning games and developing, and yet part of development, at least within the Sounders, is winning games. Like, they don't want to. That was, I think, one of the conflicts that happened during some of that USL Championship era, where there wasn't quite as much winning as they wanted. So how do you go? I mean, I don't know. How did you, now that you're looking at it from a different angle, how do you go about balancing those things, and how much directive are you giving to Hervé to say, like, look, we got to win we do have to perform on some level?
Well, I'm not telling him that yet.
Okay.
Let's see how the results go. Now, I think the most important thing is that you need to have a competitive team, and that team has to have a couple of young first team prospects in it. And that doesn't mean every player is a first team prospect. And if you make that mistake, you wind up having a team of 18-year-olds that just routinely lose badly, and that's difficult to kind of pick a guy up at halftime. It's 4-0 down, and you want to give the rousing speech, but they've heard that speech for the last 6 games, and so like they're not dumb, and they want to be able to compete. The first team competes, so it is about investment in the surrounding players, but identifying who the prospects are, and then once you know them, you play them, and you keep playing them, and they make mistakes, and you bring them off the bench for a game, and then you put them in again as a starter, and committing to that. I've just shared that's not a huge secret, I don't think, but that idea that it's a limited number and we target them. I'm really hoping that these players aren't listening to the podcast. No. Seriously, I don't think it's a surprise, because they're always at the end of the year. The veterans are like, how come that so-and-so got 25 starts and I got 18? It's because he's 17 years old and he's in the youth national team, and he's on the way up, and you're sort of plateauing. Yeah, I'm not saying you're on the way down, but plateauing. The next ascent is around the corner. But yeah, what was the question?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. I guess how you balance winning versus development.
Yes.
I think you answered it.
We want every game the second team plays to matter, and I mean, like, you know, you don't know those games after you're eliminated from the playoffs already. There's 6 games left, and you know this game doesn't matter. You can win them all, and it doesn't matter because you've already missed the playoffs. So something up, a second pat on the back is every Defiance game they played in my 3 years, even the last game of the USL season, game number 32, had we won at Phoenix, we would have qualified for the USL championship playoffs, which would have been an amazing feat. And we tied Phoenix Rising, who won the championship last year. It was a great team. Now that team had Jackson and Obed. Sam Adeniran was our leading scorer. We were good. We were a good USL team, but we also had a bunch of kids as well. Juan Alvarez played 21 games. I couldn't find him 21 games in the MLS Next Pro season.
Yeah,
the following year.
I think, were you winning at halftime of that game too?
We were up 1-0.
Yeah, not to twist the knife.
And we hit the bar when it was 1-1. But I won't say who that is because he's on the first team now.
So, you have a absolutely fascinating career path, I think, and I would love for you to. I'll give a little bit of a Wikipedia version of it, but if you could, the thing. I'll start. You went to Federal. You grew up in Federal Way. You went to what? Thomas Jefferson, is that right?
Thomas Jefferson High School, home of the Raiders.
And then you go to the University of Portland.
Yes.
And you have a good career there. You end up at the A-League Sounders. You play a few seasons with the Sounders, or am I correct so far?
There's the gap. The gap is to me is the most fascinating part of my stories. I graduated University of Portland, go Pilots, in 1989.
Oh,
I would have gone to UW, but they didn't recruit me. So I settled for Portland, and it was a wonderful. I know. Clive Charles, who has been deified, sort of was my coach. He was not. I'm going down a religious path. It's a Catholic school, but he's Saint Clive now in Portland. They just revere him in the whole city, and he did wonderful things for soccer in Portland. But when I knew him, he was very much just a man, a great guy, but made tons of mistakes. Acknowledged them. There was one, and I don't want to go too far down. I know you're on a time crunch. There was
for you.
He showed up for practice one morning with a napkin, and that was the training session. He had his tea and toast in the morning, and he had this new drill, a new drill, and it's to teach defensive heading. So you need altitude on the header. You got to get up. You got to head it high. So he brought 2 goals facing each other, 10 yards apart. And he put 2 players between the goals, and he got the balls ready on the side, and he lobbed the ball up in between the 2, and one has to try and head it over that goal while the other tries to head it over that goal. And if you do just a little imagination on what could go wrong, what could possibly go wrong, the very first ball, Paul Henningsen and Gary Osterhage went up, and they hit heads so hard. And Gary's big slicer was bleeding everywhere. Paul's concussed. There are 2 of our 3 central defenders are basically out for the next game. So he takes the napkin, he crumples it up, and he just goes running away. Yeah,
it worked so much better on the napkin.
Yeah. So that was Clive, and when I graduated college, the Portland Timbers, that by name, came back. Prior to that, it was FC Portland, just like we had FC Seattle. They had FC Portland. It was still amateur in '89. Casey Keller played for that team with me. He was our goalkeeper. I was a defender. We beat FC Seattle twice and qualified for the playoffs. I knocked the Timbers out of the playoffs with an own goal in overtime in San Diego. So, yeah. You can take the boy out of Federal Way, but and then that next year, FC Seattle became the FC Seattle Storm. For those of a certain vintage, you remember that there was a soccer team called Seattle Storm, and it existed professionally for 1 year. 1990, the year I got married to Aaron, who's sitting over there in a shirt very similar in color to mine. And we didn't plan it, but we got married in 90.
You didn't plan the shirts or the marriage?
She planned the marriage. Yeah, it was not a we, it was a she. And so we got married, and I signed my first professional contract for $1,000 a month for 6 months. And I was going to get married, so I said, "Can we stretch it? Can I go over the whole year?" So I actually got it for 10 months for $600 a month. That was my first pro contract. And then the February after that, in February 91, I played the season with the Storm. February 91, the Storm folded. And the Tacoma Stars were really nothing anymore. And I was 20, how old? 24. I was 24, married. About a week after the team folded, she announced, it wasn't that, there was no social media. She was pregnant with our first child. And so I have to get a real job, you know? So I went back to Seattle University, got a master's in teaching, and soccer was done for me when I was 24. And I taught 1 year of world history at Sedro-Woolley High School. Sedro-Woolley, any of you, the town that I-5 missed, you know, you go up north and it's just north of Mount Vernon. And I got a call from someone I had been playing. There's a men's league team around here called FTI. Some of you, if you play any men's league, you know about FTI. But I played for that team in just, you know, men's league, not serious. We didn't practice. We just show up for games. And I got a call from one of the guys who said, the Sounders are coming back. This was December of 93. The Sounders are coming back. Alan Hinton's going to be the coach. Scott Oakey's going to be the owner. And I said, well, I got a kid. I'm teaching. I have a real job. I'm not going to try that $1,000 a month thing. The only way I'll do it is if you pay me what I get paid teaching and you pay my insurance. If you could do those things, I'm back. And they did. So in between, though, I played co-ed recreational soccer with my wife in Sedro-Woolley for Lou Ankney's Septic Services. That was the name of my team. So, you know, if you see on Wikipedia, they'll say previous team on a roster. When I signed for the Sounders, my previous team was Lou Ankney's Septic Services. There you go. It was that to me is the most like it wouldn't, if it had been one more year, I'd have been too far gone. But as it was, I played 3 years in Seattle. We won 2 championships. I played 3 years in MLS. I tore my right ACL in 95 with the Sounders at the very end of the season. Dr. Morris, Jordan's dad, did my ACL. It's great. This knee is great. I tore my left ACL in 99 in Miami, the original Miami MLS team. And that's not so great. It was an inferior surgeon and a worse injury. So I retired from that at 32, I think. 32.
So I've always posited that you are the only MLS player to have played co-rec soccer before MLS. Have you ever been able to confirm this? Have you ever met anyone that...
I've never met anyone that has that story. I do have interesting, like Garth Lagerwey and I were teammates in Dallas and in Miami. And I'm going off on a tangent.
No, go for it.
We played Dungeons and Dragons, right? So I was his dungeon master, and his character was a barbarian, just a real dumb guy. And he played it dumb as well. And he is one of the smartest people I've ever met. Hopefully you can concur, Jeremiah.
Sure, yeah.
I mean,
he made some odd career decisions.
I just mean brain power. Duke undergrad, Georgetown Law School, and soccer was just something he did as a hobby on the side while he was doing all that stuff. Really, really bright guy. So, and I was his dungeon master, and he babysat our kids. as well. So,
and he had quite the name of the character.
I've shared that with you.
I think you've shared. Yeah, you've definitely shared
I
it with
can
me.
share it. I can share it with everyone now because
Yeah,
Garth isn't here anymore. He's
Right.
in Atlanta. Grodius Pig Popper was his character's name. Yeah, I won't get into the details. Thank you, honey.
Well,
I'm always more erudite with a couple of pints. So.
well, I feel like we should at least talk a little bit about the organization that you're currently overseeing.
Yes.
Who are some players that are currently not on the first team that let me actually, I'll line it up a little bit more easily. During preseason, 3 players who really stood out to me who are not first, or that are players that you've had at various times: Stuart Hawkins, Snyder Brunell, and I don't know if you actually had Gallatin. Is it Sandness?
Sandness, yes. He's a Seattle kid.
Yeah, he is a Seattle kid. And did he play for you last year?
No, he's yet to make an appearance. He's a 2008.
Yeah, he's 15,
year.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what can you tell us about these 3 guys and if they're?
Stuart is from the South End. I think his family lives on Fox Island.
Yes.
Yes. And he is he's one of those that when he was 13, he was tiny. He was just a little kid, and then he just kept growing, and now he's taller than me.
Yeah.
And he still his frame needs to expand. Like he's got to get stronger, and it's one of those things that will happen, especially with a gym like the first team now have. It's
very impressive.
It's pretty amazing. But he's super technical. He played on the U.S. U17 World Cup team in Indonesia last year. Really highly rated, good passer, can play with both feet, although is right-footed. Needs to get better in the air. I think Jackson Reagan needs to get better in the air. And I've been saying that. I was his coach in 2017 with the academy. He's huge, but just because you're big, that doesn't mean your timing and everything else is right. So, and I'm friends with Jackson, so I hope this is not critical. I love the guy, and I think he's a really good player. But Stu is he's so young at that position. Experience is everything. So I expect Stuart to play almost exclusively with Defiance. I would love him to prove me wrong, but he needs the minutes, and he's not going to play over Ymar or Jackson or any of the other central defenders they have. So I think Stuart's where he needs to be, and we'll keep giving him the push. That's one thing I still do in my current role is I still work with the center backs. I do video with them and game breakdown and stuff like that. Snyder Brunell is 2007, and he's we have a few young midfielders, right? And so that's the thing. When I try and put myself in Brian's shoes, and what is he like, and what does he need, and he probably doesn't need another teenage midfielder. He's got a couple. And some are just barely out of their teens, like Danny Leva and Josh Tensio. Soda Kitahara. Soda and I, his birthday is one day before mine, so we always exchange texts around our birthdays. But he just turned 21. So we're really talking about a young group of guys. Obed, of course. Snyder is another one of those. He's a 2007, can play pretty much anywhere in midfield. He's still just developing, and I think he'll be more Atencio than Leva in that he'll be a little more. His radius of operation will be wider. Maybe not as technically clean as Danny can be. Maybe a better athlete. He's good in the air, good with both feet, and he's 16. So. Who knows what his ceiling is, but he's signed to the second team. Stewart is signed to the first team. Snyder is signed to the second team. And he was the first academy player to play 1,000 minutes for the second team as an amateur, unsigned. Last year, he played 1,000 minutes. He was one of the 3 I targeted.
Right.
Right. So, and Gallatin is, Brian loves it. Schmetz loves Gallatin Sandness. He's a great frame for a center back. He's a 2008. And again, it's weird talking about a 2008 like he's a prospect, but This kid is as loud a central defender as I have heard on the youth level. He's bossy. He, in a good way, you know, like he's what you want, the organizer in the middle of the, your job is so easy as a center back. If you just make sure everyone's where they're supposed to be, then you're in the perfect spot anyway. So you look great if they take care of all the business, and all you're doing is cleaning up messes really that they make, right? So you're bailing teammates out, but you put him in the right spot. He does that, and he's good with both feet. And he's, when I say good, like he works on his left to drive a ball. The standard for that at the academy level historically is Sam Rogers, who some of you would know, and he's in Norway right now. I coached Sam the same time I coached Jackson, and Sam is is 2-footed. Like most people say they're 2-footed, they're never. You always have one that you're more dominant with, but Gallatin could be that because he works on the left foot like Sam worked on his left foot. Almost like obsessively, you know, 100 balls after practice where you paint a target on the wall and he just kicks and kicks and kicks and kicks. Not till he hits it. He just keeps kicking and kicking. He'll hit the target and hit the target, then miss it and hit it again. It's not like a finish line, because there's only one finish line in life, Jeremiah, and that's death. So you just
raising the discourse.
Just keep going.
So I noticed that Gallatin is listed at like 6'150". That feels like a way under. Like he seems enormous when he's got like size 20 shoes. It seems like. He's probably 6'1" ish. Okay.
And 150. It's hard for me to tell because I've put on a few pounds and my playing weight was 190. And he's not 190. So
okay.
Yeah.
So somewhere between 150 and 190.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone else that you're like really intrigued by that is with Defiance, or I suppose even lower on the
Georgie Monongu. Georgie is a winger. He's from Cote d'Ivoire, that's Ivory Coast. I don't know. I don't speak French. They just won the African Cup of Nations. He was very, very proud. He showed up he flew with the first team to Spain. He was in preseason in Spain with them, scored a goal, just like he did last preseason. And he is, we have players train with the first team all the time, and we watch a lot of first team training. But, Leo Chu is very quick. He's one of those that over 10 yards, he pretty much will beat anyone. And Georgie I think he's even faster and slipperier. The question for him, and it's the question with so many good wings, is what happens after you beat your man? That's where you make your money, really. Being fast is a genetic thing, being fast and skillful and smart and all that. Georgie is on the cusp. I really do think that if he can sort out he's got the move and then just pick between two options. There's probably 10 options you could pick from. Limit yourself to 2. Choose the best of those 2, and you're gonna turn out good. And he's the sort of guy that stands still and jumps and lands on his feet, does a flip. You can do it either way, and it's not like he has to get his arms going. He just stands and he can flip. I've never seen anyone do it. He is like, his shirt's off. It's not the 8-pack. He has all sorts of, he's the most muscular guy I've ever seen. And his smile is bright. He's a lovely, lovely guy. He's one that we all root for. Came to us through the same people that got us Nuhu. It's an organization that scouts young talent. They work with a team in the Czech Republic Czechia. And they work with MLS teams. And so Georgie's from the same people, Leo Cullen and his group. So, I think Georgie's a big prospect.
And so he had an eye issue last year. Is that totally behind him, or what are we allowed to say about his eye issue?
The eye issue is totally behind him.
He's not wearing goggles. He was wearing goggles last year.
He is not wearing goggles.
And I noticed today he was of all the unsigned players, all the non-first team signed players, he was the only one still training with the first team today. I don't know.
As he will be tomorrow.
So we'll take that for what it's worth, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think I've kept you plenty time. You've been extremely. I love the stories. You're probably the best story. I had a whole thing. Actually, I want to bring this up. You told me the other day that you sometimes karaoke to "Criminal" by Fiona Apple.
Yes.
What makes a good karaoke song?
Well, it depends on the crowd.
Okay.
I think karaoke is very crowd dependent because certain crowds you have to sing a Sweet Caroline type song or you get completely ignored. And some people that's perfectly fine. If I'm singing karaoke,
you don't want to be ignored.
Darn it, I want to be seen. I don't maybe want to be heard, but I told Jeremiah I am in a band. I play guitar and I sing, and we played the Browns Point Salmon Bake in Northeast Tacoma a couple of years ago. It is one of those hobbies that I don't get to practice enough. We practice once a month, maybe, and I don't know the last show we played, but I do like to get up in front of people and have a good time. So yes, Depeche Mode's Policy of Truth is one of those, like, if it's a crowd that's interested in an interesting song, I'm going for that.
All right.
Or I'll do Thunder Road by Bruce Springsteen because my voice kind of matches the boss. So
right.
I can get gravelly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like a good place to end this. Wade, so much. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope we see you around a lot. It's been great having you on again.
Thank you, Jeremiah, and thanks all of you for coming out.
So thank you to Project 9 for hosting us. Thank you to everyone that came out. This is a great crowd. I was really worried that what kind of turnout we get, and so I really want to say thank you. And we'll see you next time, I guess.
We love you. Let's win another one.